Chapter 2 Survivor. Hubert twisted in the bedroom mirror, trying to look at the bite marks on his side. He gently eased the bandages away so he could see the damage beneath. 2 pairs of red arches, deep enough to scar. He'd be lucky to escape with all his organs intact. The chances of Hubert's mangled, magic-bitten corpse warping into Enbarr on any attempt to use the spell were still far too high. When the caster was vulnerable, dark magic got greedy. Only reason kept it from turning against its wielder. Feed it well, as Hubert usually did, and it would obey. But if it sensed an opportunity, it wouldn't hesitate. Why had he agreed to Her Majesty's request to go and barter for supplies with the Morphins personally? He wasn't even good at it. He just used his flintiest gaze until they gave him whatever price he wanted. Like any other creature with an ounce of sense, they were scared silly. Not that he could blame them, given the rumors he'd planted saying the Emperor was gearing up to conquer Morphis. Not exactly true, but fear was a great deterrent. The Emperor wouldn't approve, of course, but what she didn't know couldn't hurt her. Outside, over the wind and the waves, he heard splashing, a telltale sign Ferdinand was climbing up the rocks. Every 2 or 3 days, he seemed to find an excuse to pay the lighthouse a visit. Mostly he seemed to want a share of Sedith's catch. Sedith said he wasn't a skilled fisherman, but the pile of fish he brought back in his tiny fishing boat each day suggested otherwise. When Ferdinand spotted Hubert's approach, he smiled and made a noise of greeting somewhere between a chirp and a purr. Ridiculously, Hubert felt a bubble of nerves rise up in his throat. The bite marks on his side throbbed. Sedith went fishing, and Flane went to the village market. I actually intended to deliver something to you. Ferdinand indicated a clear glass bottle on top of the rocks. A scrunched-up envelope nestled inside. Hubert must have looked confused, because he explained. A reply to your letter. I have a friend at the port post office. She gives me anything for Sedith and Flane. Hubert unstoppered the bottle and fished out the envelope. It bore Edelgard's handwriting. He hadn't expected a letter in return, especially when Flane had given him such a sparse return address. Surely it couldn't be real. Before he could stop himself, he tore it open and sank down on the nearest rock to read. Dearest Hubert, you do not know how relieved I am to have received your letter. I really did fear the worst once I heard the news the ship had been lost. She went on to write that she was willing to grant his rescuers a boon for his safe return. Land, gold, a title, whatever they wished. Hubert wondered what she'd say if she knew his rescuers were most likely of the Seros religion. He hated the church and all it stood for. But it was difficult to hate the people who'd taken him in. Still, part of him wanted every scrap of the church annihilated. No matter how benign, they couldn't let it rebuild. Ever. Hubert felt water dripping on his shirt. Ferdinand read over his shoulder, his warm skin far too close to be comfortable. Because, of course, on top of everything else, he lacked a sense of personal space. Excuse me? Hubert hissed. This is a private correspondence. Ferdinand blinked at him with an expression of mischievous innocence, which really shouldn't have been endearing. Is it a love letter? Hubert sputtered. Certainly not. It is from the Emperor. But it says, you will be in my thoughts. I hope to see you home soon. Hubert hurriedly folded the letter back up. It also says I get a reward. Hubert couldn't see Her Majesty knighting a fish, even if that fish had dragged Hubert to shore and kissed him back to life. Hubert glanced at Ferdinand's lips, and immediately wished he hadn't. They looked far too appealing. What is it that you would like? Hubert asked, exasperated. He prepared himself for damage control. I would very much like to go to the opera. Right, fine. Except the opera house is in the middle of Enbarr. Are you going to drag yourself through the streets? Over the cobblestones? Ferdinand seemed to ponder for a moment. You could carry me from a boat. Ferdinand, I am injured. Even if I were not, I do not think I would be able to lift you, much less carry you. Ferdinand pouted. What about the Emperor? She's supposed to be strong. Out of the question. She's the Emperor. It is not as if anyone could manage your tail dragging on the ground anyways, even if they were able to lift you. Ferdinand's crestfallen look affected Hubert more than it should have. I could get Dorothea to come here for a private performance, if you really want to hear her. Sorry, Dorothea. It will not be the same. It would be something, and I am not usually the sort of man to grant favors. Ferdinand's pupils were larger than a human's, and his eyes were very bright, fringed with long lashes. Hubert averted his gaze. They were too much. Ferdinand hadn't moved away, and Hubert could feel an appealing warmth from his body, a vitality which demanded his attention. When I rescued you, I saw you used magic. You lit up the water. Is that the real reason you saved me? Hubert found it a comforting thought. He didn't believe in nonsense like fate or destiny, or even luck. If you wanted something, you must carve a path to it, rather than waiting for everything to work out. Ferdinand saving him by chance had never felt right. Ferdinand ducked behind his hair, seemingly suddenly shy. Even though your death seemed certain, you were calm. You were brave. You never stopped fighting. I've brushed with dark edges of death before. I can assure you it is not nearly as exciting after the first 100 times. Indeed, it is not. But why would a human come so close to death so often? You do not even eat each other. We have wars. Long, bloody ones. Ferdinand looked out to the sea. The end of his tail twitched. Your magic felt like screaming. Hubert knew his magic wasn't pleasant to be around, but he'd never heard it described like that. Instead of accusing him of being a monster, Ferdinand leaned in again. Curious. Can you teach me? Can I? Hubert was momentarily stunned. No. Dark magic is dangerous, even for an experienced mage. It is not to be trifled with on some whim. It is not a whim. I only thought maybe I could save the ships. Why do you care about the ships? Surely you get just as hungry as all the others. I do not eat people, Ferdinand said illicitly, even when they imply I am both overweight and stupid. I did not say you were. Hubert rubbed his forehead, deciding he wasn't under any circumstances going to be baited into a compliment. Dark magic is dangerous, foul, and easy to mishandle. One wrong move, and there'd be nothing left of you. Ferdinand's mouth turned downwards, and his tail swished in an agitated arc. Why did you learn it then? To protect Lady Edelgard. Hubert remembered tasting his own misery in the first spell he cast. In dark magic, he found power, a ruthless, unforgiving, hungry power, which consumed all it touched. He wanted to save Lady Edelgard from the nightmares she endured, but he learned too late. He clutched the letter in his fist, trying not to drown in the tide of his memories. I want to protect people too, Ferdinand said. It is the same, do you not think? No. Hubert limped away, ignoring Ferdinand's protests. What was the matter with him? Ever since he washed up here, his emotions had run riot. Fear, regret, and loneliness bubbled up in a whirling cocktail. He needed to get himself back under control. Lady Edelgard was perfectly safe with Bernadetta and Dorothea. She didn't need him anymore. He reread the letter again and again and again, looking for a secret meaning, or phrasing or coding. There was none. She really was fine, and she really did just want him home safe. When Flame returned, She was laden with paper bags. "I need you to heal me again," Hubert said without preamble. Flame shrieked. The bags dropped from her hands. "Hubert! Must you lurk on the stairs like that?" She narrowed her eyes. "Ferdinand is most upset with you. Whatever happened?" "He's got some fool idea about learning magic. As if I am going to help wreck our ships even more efficiently, without a care. I almost died thanks to them, and that was without magic." "Ferdinand is not a threat to those ships. Come, let me show you." Flame led him into her room. It was simple. A bed, a desk, a bookcase. The most startling thing was the walls. They were all struck with clippings from newspapers. Flame pointed a finger at a section stacked with images of shattered ships and fishtails. "I think Ferdinand first showed up around here," said Flame, pointing at a clipping dated about 7 years ago. Miracle made! On the 3rd of the Pegasus moon, a luxury cruiser crashed into an unknown object. Flora, 17, described the ship rocking back and forth until it finally tipped over. She said she was carried by an unknown man to the base of the lighthouse, where the newly installed keepers called on the goddess to save her life. "My savior would have been very handsome, if not for the fact he had a fishtail," said Flora, her eyes far away. The ordeal has certainly left a mark on the young woman whose mistress perished below the waves. What was wrong with Ferdinand's tail? Well, unusual. It could hardly be described as ugly or unattractive. Hubert found himself offended on the mer's behalf, before focusing on the mention of the goddess. He suspected as much. "Your father is a Seros priest." Flame's eyes grew uncharacteristically hard. "If we had known who you were—" "You would have let me die. I do not hold it against you." "I still hardly believe it. Hubert von Vestra, have dead on our doorstep. Rebellions thwarted in minutes. Armies of hundreds dissolved in the acid of your magic. Always the Emperor's faithful companion, dealing blow after blow against the Church. Yet a ritual from the Seros religion restored you."
"I could stay somewhere else, if that would be preferable."
"Do you have coin, then? The village inn will not take you without it. The Cove Church might have, but it was forced to close by order of the Empire." Hubert had nothing. His belongings were at the bottom of the sea, and Flame knew that. "I will not punish you for your beliefs, but treat you as we have all the others. I want to be a good person," she said, lifting her chin. She pointed out several more articles with similar stories to Flora's. Some described Ferdinand. Some remembered the man-eating mers and campaigned for a new shipping route. The journalists seemed dismissive and printed sentences like, "No mer sightings have been verified." "Ferdinand brings the people he rescues to the lighthouse. We heal them and provide them with food and board until they're well enough to travel again. There is still plenty of fish to go around." Flame lit up on the word fish, seemingly immediately cheered by even the thought. Hubert was beginning to suspect Flame had a one-track mind. If it didn't relate to fish or manfish, she wasn't interested. "Do the villagers really not know about Ferdinand?" "They only know rumors. We're too remote to attract many visitors. There's a friendlier beach much closer to the town, so not many come out here. Though I am sure Ferdinand would love the attention. He would not get any peace with the press after him." Her sweet face shifted into something approximating a dark look. "If you try and hurt him—" "Our war was against the Church and the nobility it supported. We have nothing against mers. We did not even know of their existence." "Good, because if you try anything, I would kill you." Then Flame smiled, so big and bright, Hubert wasn't sure he'd heard her properly. Hubert slept best whenever the sound of singing drifted up over the wind. He hadn't asked Ferdinand about it, hadn't had the chance. The troublesome mer continued to pop in every couple of days. Each time Hubert heard splashing, he wanted to go and see what Flame thought was so funny. But he wasn't proud of the way he'd lost control of himself before. Having to explain himself seemed like too much of a chore, especially when Ferdinand's presence sent his emotions careening off the deep end. Why? Just because Ferdinand kissed him? He wanted to pace his room, but it was more like a shuffle. There was a tap of feet on the staircase, and then Sadith was there, clearing his throat. He kept his distance most of the time, letting Flame play nurse, and quietly keeping watch over her. There was something wary in his eyes, which had been there ever since Hubert admitted who he was. At the time, Hubert thought it might get outside help quicker. But of course, the one time he was truthful was the one time he should have used an alias. "Flame is making us tea," he said. "Do you want to join us? Provided it isn't poisoned, that would be fine. The Seros faith preaches peace and mercy to all. I would not dishonor it." Hubert snorted. The Archbishop did not seem to uphold such lofty ideals. Rhea went down a dark, desperate path. That I cannot deny. Humanity should control its own fate. Sadith clenched his jaw. If you really wish to tear each other to pieces, there is nothing left to stop you. Do you want tea or not? Tea was outside, so Ferdinand could join them, and served over a wobbly wooden, folded-up table in very old, chipped teacups. Sadith explained how the leaves were dried, crushed, and blended. It was far less disarming to have Ferdinand wholly focused on someone else. He had a great many questions about plants and fruit, and Sadith answered them all with a patience Hubert grudgingly admired. He examined the teacup. On the underside, he could feel the grooves of 3 numbers. 8, 6, 5. "Do you collect antiques?" he asked.
"Oh, no," Flame said. "This set was a birthday gift from my mother."
What a strange thing to gift a child. Flame reddened. Hubert had obviously offended her, but children weren't exactly known to be careful with their things, and a complete antique tea set was surely worth quite a bit to collectors. Flame has always been mature for her age. Sadith weighed in. He too looked troubled. "I think it is a wonderful gift," said Ferdinand, as if his opinion mattered. "I like the flowers and the shining handles. Truly magnificent." Flame beamed at him. "I brought you something too, to say thanks for the tea," he said. "Wait here."
"You did not have to."
But he was already gone, Longtail slipping gracefully through the rocks and into the water. Sadith raised his eyebrow. "Whatever it is, you do not have to eat it just to please him." Flame chewed her lip, anxiously scanning the waves. Hubert took a sip of the tea. By now, he was sick of the taste. When Ferdinand splashed his way back up out of the water, he was clutching something long and shining, a golden chain, with a stone attached, shimmering green in the sunlight, a perfect match for Flame's eyes. Hubert felt a low burning jealousy in his gut. He hadn't felt it since he was 20 years old, and waiting for Lady Edelgard to grant him a dance at the White Heron Ball.
Where did you find it?"
asked Flame, handling it reverently.
"Have you been pillaging the old church again?"
"You said my soul would be banished by angry ghouls if I took anything from there," Ferdinand said, shooting a peevish glance at Sadith.
"The jewel is very unusual," said Flame. "I wonder what it is."
Hubert's breath caught as she held it up to the light. Of course, he'd only the previous week bargained for a crate of the things. "Flame, let me see that." Hubert seized the necklace and hurled it back into the ocean. "Hubert!" Ferdinand hissed. "That was unspeakably rude! How dare you!" He turned back to the water. Hubert seized hold of Ferdinand's arm and held him as tight as he could. "Just hold on a minute," he insisted. Neither Flame or Sadith moved to help him, and keeping a firm grasp on the slippery fishman was no easy task. His skin was smooth like a seashell's, and his tail thrashed madly against the ground, with more power than Hubert expected. He wouldn't be able to hold on for an echoing boom. Flame screamed. Ferdinand stopped struggling, and Hubert's breath caught as he clasped Ferdinand's hand instead. A huge, hissing geyser foamed into the air where the necklace had fallen. It's a weapon, Hubert explained, for Morphise, for use by mages in the military. His mind spun, ideas churning. If Ferdinand could find items from the sunken ship, it opened up new possibilities of escape. He was hardly comfortable bedding down with 2 former members of the clergy. Being separated from the Emperor for 2 weeks had already felt like too long. It had been a month since he'd last seen her face. "I need you to get me something from the wreck," he told Ferdinand. "A glass bottle filled with blue powder. It should say warp on the side. If the ink hasn't run to nothing, that is." "Warp? What does that mean?" "It means to instantaneously transport oneself across space. I could use it to go home." Ferdinand shimmied his tail, creating exciting little ripples in the air. "I'll get it for you," he said, "if you teach me magic." The mer's eyes gleamed in triumph, beautiful and infuriating in equal measures.